Howdy, folks. Good to see you. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. Just wanted to say hello to all of you. And we'll start, like I said, just at the top of the hour. So smoke them if you got them, as they say.
So she's going to do a quick intro about continuing education units.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have one quick administrative announcement before we hand it over to our speakers to kick off the session. This session has been pre-qualified to support continuing education requirements for several cybersecurity certifications. If you are a member seeking attendance documentation, please be sure to scan your badge at the scanner located in the back of the seating area at the conclusion of the session. Scanner shut off 15 minutes post-session, so please get your badge scanned before networking with speakers. Also note that to qualify for CEUs or CPEs, the session must run a full 60 minutes. That 60 minutes can include Q&A, so please have questions ready for the speakers to fill the time requirement. Full details on the continuing education program are available in the TechNet Cyber app and the conference website. Thank you, and now over to our speakers.
Well, thank you very much. We will keep everybody honest about the hour requirement. When it comes to questions, folks, the more interactive we make this, the better everything's going to be. So please get ready to ask any questions. If you have questions right now, please feel free to raise your hand. For example, I'm curious. Can everybody raise their hand? Is that physically possible? Can you do? Okay, we have some evidence of this. Good. Okay, doing all right. You pass. So. Welcome, everybody. I'm James Stanger. We have Matt Eisner here from the 8140 folks. We have Brian Correa from SANS GIAC. I'm James Stanger from CompTIA. Brian and I represent also something called the C3. None of you really heard of that before. C3 is a consortium that consists of, and let's see if I can get all the certs. I'll probably need some help, Brian. Okay. CompTIA, SANS GIAC, Cert Nexus.
Yep.
Let's see, IAPP. ISC2, and ISACA.
You got them all.
And so I got them all. And the reason why we were asked by AFCEA to do this particular session was to represent the upskilling industry when it comes to cybersecurity. So there's that. So real quick, Brian, give yourself a quick introduction, then we'll get an introduction from you, and we'll move on from there. Fair enough?
Yep, so Brian Correa, Director of Business Development. I'm actually on the certification side of things. I've been with SANS since 2000, so I always jokingly say I started when I was 12, and I'm now 20-something. But thank you for coming to today's presentation. I've been around when we were 8570. If anybody, if anybody remembers that. I'm still trying to regain my voice. I was at RSA last week with Matt over here. So if you hear me doing a couple things, I'm just trying to regain my voice. It's a little bit of going through puberty all over again, but I'm getting there.
Matt?
No, thank you. As you can tell, me and Brian are taking this global. We're going around on the circuit. But Matt Eisner, I work at the DoD, Department of Defense CIO office. I am the program manager or chief of the workforce development branch. Basically, we are the ones that come up with all the wonderful 8140 and DCWF content. We are always here to support our wonderful partners in the C3 groups. They are doing a lot of the yeoman's work for us with 8140, with training our stakeholders and all of our stakeholders, or all of our individuals. So we are always appreciative, and I will always come out to support. So I appreciate you guys coming to this.
And we want to thank you very much for coming here, Matt.
Yep.
I am a poor substitute. I'm James Stanger, poor substitute for Tara Dean. Tara Dean is a person who basically works very closely with Matt and the 8140 office. But I think we can do this. What we have is that we do have a bit of a presentation. But the first thing I do want to I'll tell you about myself. James Stanger. I got my PhD in unemployment English in 1997. By then, I had already moved back into the IT space where I, at that point, was configuring firewalls and doing things like that. So I've been in the space for some time. So I have kind of three perspectives on things. First of all, as a techie, as a technician, works in this stuff as a security analyst. Second, as an educator, done a lot of work in creating education programs around the world. Both for CompTIA and for other organizations, from IBM to universities. And then the third, I've been a company president before, so I know what it means to actually, hire people who work, at least hopefully, for a living. So before we start with this presentation and this discussion, I want to see, first of all, if anybody, we already checked to see if most of you could raise your hands, and you all could. Does anybody have any questions right off for Matt or us? Because we want to focus on implementation of 8140, not kind of what it is meant to be or how it's shifted from 8570 to 8140. I think we've done that over the years. We're talking about how to actually make this work. But I'm curious if anybody has any questions right now. If you have a question, that should be a microphone that works right there.
Yeah, it's empty right now.
Oh, it's empty. That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that means
You have to scream.
That means you get to come up here and ask the questions. Anybody have any questions? Yes, sir. Come on up here.
Ah, Jason.
Yeah. Oh, here we go.
Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear, great. So my question is there any type of outreach plan to implement, to get the word out, to get out to the stakeholders?
Yes, there is.
Besides FCA, these great FCA events?
Yeah, the implementations. Now, I'm going to ask you to qualify that question just a little bit more about implementation. For example, you can go up to SANS GIAC website. You can go to the CompTIA website where we have mappings altogether for the DCWF. And for those of you who don't know what DCWF is, basically it's all of the job codes, the
74 now.
74 now. I'm always one behind.
Well, it just got approved last week. So.
Well, I should have known.
We'll give you
so 74 job titles that have been taken out of NIST, the 74, and we have a mapping of 73 of those on our website, for example, in each of them.
73.
So there's a partial answer, but I think you're asking a little bit something more, so keep going.
Yes. Well, I was interested because I started transition careers. I facilitate cyber-focused and security clearance-focused job fairs on DoD installations across the country. So I'm going where all these hubs of cyber workforce is located. So I'm organizing events. I'm going nationwide. So I was just curious if there's anything related to what I do with implementation.
Very much so. I'll say with this, we're doing it with all of the AFCEA events, for example. We're also doing it within this nice meeting that's coming up, conference that's coming up in June. We also have been doing webinars, for example, that are on demand and things like that. But I'll turn the time over. Matt, what
No, I mean, very similar where we've kind of rotated with these conferences. All the TechNet, AFCEAs, we try to get regionally. We go to San Diego. We have our Distance Cyber Exchange, which has tons of resources for people to leverage.
That's
but
in
I
the
think
presentation as well, by the way, so keep going. Yeah.
But I think what you're kind of alluding to, and we're going to talk afterwards a little bit about it, is kind of those skill-based hiring events. Going after and actually proactively recruiting, coming up with scenario-based types things. And we're currently doing some pilots right now to figure out how we can do that, to validate the content, to be able to take that to our senior leaders to make sure we can show that proof of concept. That's going to take some time, but it's definitely on the horizon, and hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be able to actually start implementing, partnering with groups like yourself to be able to do that.
And I was going to say, there's some things that we're doing on our end. For example, we hired one of those fancy media companies to do kind of like a slick 3-5-minute video of how do you implement 8140. One for the troops, one for the leaders. That should be coming out here shortly, within a month or two. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it sweet, simple. We're also doing resources like, for example, I just did an interview with Matt last week at RSA. There's some things along those lines, but I'd love to hear of some additional ideas. We're always looking at different ways. I know CompTIA is also doing quite a bit. So we're trying to build resources, whether it's CompTIA, whether it's SANS, but also even through the C3 of how we can reach out to everybody.
Another way to reach out is whether it be a contractor or whether it be a a person who's active military can work with their supervisors to work on the, what I call the encoding of the workforce, which we have a slide on that basically instead of the 8570 way of doing things with the levels and things like that, we actually have up to three job roles that somebody can get encoded with. And so each of the team leaders would know about that or should know about that. And I think it's the should that is active here. So
Okay.
Well, one of the questions I always ask is, so who here is 8570 compliant? All right, so we got a decent amount.
yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes one of the big questions is 8570 still in existence? So Matt, I don't
No,
know
it
if you
is
want to
not.
answer that one.
No, it is not. It is sunsetted back in.
February of
I
2023.
know you're going to ask about contractors as well.
Yeah.
So, well, that'll go to the process. Is we're currently working on a revamp of the DFARS to update that. It is at the memo with the ANS individuals right now to be signed. Once that happens, that will take into effect, and it'll be kind of a tidal wave. And we're going to probably give about a 2-year process for contracts, all PWSs, and all things to be updated to be in compliance as well. So we will not throw you to the lions. Once it actually happens, we'll make sure we give you plenty of time to be able to update those.
Thank you. And anyone in the audience, if you are involved with talent acquisition or recruiting, come talk to me after this is finished.
There you go.
Thank you very much. Okay, question up here.
So the question would be then 8570 for contractors still?
You're talking about today, or are you
Today.
talking? Okay, today.
Until for the next 2 years.
For the next 2 years, currently we don't collect 8570 requirements, so it is not a requirement for us. That's my very political answer.
But as you know, Mr. Garcia from the Army
Yep.
has put out what requirements are for contractors.
Yes.
Right? So how do we would
You follow your service-specific CIO's guidance.
That's right. That
I
was
am
my
never going
answer.
to trump Mr. Garcia.
That was my answer. You follow your CIO for your particular branch.
Until the department comes out with higher level guidance that can help guide that.
You seem to be happy with that answer.
Or at least resign to it, huh?
We,
All right, go ahead.
I was just saying it's no longer, because 8570 is not a live reporting mechanism. That was started by CIO. We mandated that it gets reported to CIO. We don't collect that anymore. So that it's completely up to a service if they want to continue that. There's a lot of other things like, access, privileged access users. That's also a service-dependent, interaction. So it's how they want to leverage it. 8140 is still in the infancy stages that we're building it as we go. We will all catch up, and this time next year, I guarantee it'll be done.
We saw a long rollout with 8570 15 years ago, and it'll be a similar, I think, situation with this. When it comes, do you have additional questions, sir?
No,
All right.
thank you.
You can keep standing up if you want, man. Let me ask you this: elevator speech about what 8140 is, and then then I think we'll delve into the presentation that we have, because we have a half of a presentation a bit about people who work for a living, and then the people who are the leaders. Just kidding, but the people who are soldiers, as it were, contractors, and then leaders. But my elevator speech, and this is where I'm going to throw it over to Matt, where he can, if I get it right, Matt will buy me the incredible stick of steak in Frankfurt, Germany, like we had a couple of years ago. If I get it wrong, I have to buy his. 8140 is the opportunity to encode the workforce, contractors and military, active military both, with up to 3 job roles. The idea to help better upskill them, to track them, and even better deploy them. And so it's really an upskilling initiative that includes not only what we would traditionally call cybersecurity, but all of cyber, from tech, from whether it be cloud or AI or development. I'll stop right there. Is that, where would you put that?
No, I think that's definitely good lead-in into what 8140 is. I always go with it is a full talent management program. Is when what you kind of alluded to is the coding. So it's the identification of your workforce. Where are all the people? What can they do? What are their capabilities? The next phase, which is what I consider the more important phase, is the residential qualifications. It gets after on-the-job training, making sure the people that sit down in front of your computers are capable of doing the job. everyone does that already. There's not an organization in this right now that doesn't have some kind of check ride, check sheet, some kind of training that they put their people through when they come onboarded. All we're doing from the department level is standardizing that. We're making sure that everyone's consistent, so we have a picture to tell our senior leaders where our cyber workforce is. Cyber, also, always want to allude to, it's not just cybersecurity. It is IT, cybersecurity, cyber ops, AI, data, software engineering. It is an encompassing group of technology-type people. So,
And I was going to say, if it's what's in it for me, and so Matt, hopefully this is okay.
Yes.
So they're going ahead and they're coding the workforce, right? It's been very, very difficult to take all of DoD together and code that workforce, but they're trying to see where there's gaps. So when you need to have additional staff, what they're trying to do is they're trying to look. So hopefully, Matt, I'm trying to sell you.
oh, please.
They're looking at where today are they looking okay on the workforce? Where are the gaps? Where they can fill those gaps in? What's the priority? What's maybe top, number one, number two, number three? And so ultimately now having a full picture by being able to look at the workforce. And I think the idea is that in cybersecurity, nobody is just a cybersecurity expert anymore, right? You're a vulnerability assessor, you're a warning analyst, you're a forensics, you're a cybercrime investigator, you're a CISO, you're a leader, you're something. Yep. And so that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to be able to take that. And so have I done a good job?
No, it was a wonderful sales pitch. I enjoy it.
It's onboarding and also dashboarding, the ability to visualize the workforce and deploy it wherever it needs. Yep. Looks like we have another question here.
I'm really excited about this talent management
A little
program.
closer.
So I'm really excited about this full talent management program that you're starting.
Yep.
And I would love to hear more about it. It's gone from 8570, which is, depending on your CIO, where that's tracked, how that's tracked, to 8140,
right.
plus Cybercom as their own work roles. It used to be signal civilians, all 2210s, and then where you get shifted, where you get. But now I'm assuming you have a solution that's already built in place to manage civilian workforce as well as contract requirements based off of work role, job title, and then potentially, I guess, an additional skill identifier based off of the compliance and training requirements within that work role.
Yep.
So I'll love the name of the program, where we can find it, all of that. That would be super helpful.
Yeah, so, and if not, we can send it out to you. We have a lot of resources, this is Cyber Exchange. If you go on there, there's tons of areas where you can kind of go and see what the program entitles. You mentioned Cyber Command. Inside of the DCWF, Cyber Command has their own element. It's Cyber Effects. All the 15 work roles that are inside of the JCT and CS are embedded. Yeah. The knowledge and skills are one for one.
There's suggested
Nope.
coursework, and then there is skills, knowledge, skills, and identifiers that. So they're not required. So if that person has gotten a joint qualification, that checks the block for the 8140?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so if they have already existing JQR training.
So does that feed into JCC2?
Yes,
or?
So we are actually, middle of May, I'm going to Cyber Command to connect JCC2 system to the Advana system at the department where we get our visual that we send to our senior leaders. So those will connect. All the reporting, readiness reporting is going to mirror similar to JCC2. It's going to be in Advana as well.
So it automates up from low side to high side?
Yep.
Advana.
It'll have all those connectors, make sure that all that, so you only have to report in one place.
Google that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions, folks? Other questions, folks, like that? Well, Brian, did you have anything to follow up on that, Matt, and then Brian?
Nope. I mean,
Why don't we go ahead and we'll go through some of these slides here.
okay.
Shall we do that?
Yeah, let's go for it.
So let's go ahead. You've got this, the clicker, I think.
Oh, I do have the clicker.
You do indeed. So, folks, the idea of implementing this is 3 steps. You basically focus on the troops, the civilians, the supervisors, and the contractors. It's multiple paths to compliance, meaning certification, things like that. And by the way, these slides, we can make them available to you. So go ahead and, I assume you're not taking pictures of Mr. Handsome here. You're taking pictures of this over here, which is good. So, coded up to 3 job roles based on your position description. What else would you add to that, sir?
I mean, the important thing is most people are going to be one role,
Yeah.
But you could be coded up to 3, right, based on what you do. And you'll see on here, it's either a PD, position description, or a MOS for the Army and Marines. And so you want to look and see. Now, if you don't have a code, and so Matt, let me know, you need to follow up with your supervisor. Now, if you want to know where your code is at, here's some examples. So Matt's group was nice enough to give us a couple examples here, and we've kind of taken out some of the information that people are not supposed to see. You can see on here. So this is a PD, is an example. Here's another one. Here's an individual that has 3.
Happens to have 3.
Yeah.
And I think this is a big deal about the whether it be 1 or 3. Tony Matthews over here, who's sitting over here, say hi, Tony, pointed out something. That 3 is kind of important because some people don't necessarily just stick always with being a security analyst or just a pen tester. There are adjacent job roles. Or they might start with being a networking pro and then move on to become a pen tester. And it provides that ability. And that's what the matrix-like nature of 8140 is about, to allow people to upskill properly.
What I want to throw in there is the conception of what the DCWF does gets a little bit diluted. Work roles are not positions. So we went across the whole department, got standardized things for the 74 work roles, the knowledge and skills and abilities of those individuals. We know we're not going to cover everything. So we give the flexibility to you guys, the stakeholders, to be able to kind of put what you call like a Lego approach, where you can add a couple work roles. You have a primary that does 50 to 70% of your work role, and then you can add some knowledge and skills from other work roles. What I want to highlight here is if you put 3 work roles, you're going to be qualified in all 3 work roles. So you're going to meet the qualifications not only in foundational but residential. So some people get to that point where they want to actually highlight that I'm 3, but it's not really identifying that you're 3. It's just making sure that you have those knowledge and skills embedded in your overall position description. So that's what we want to be able to do, is it has the flexibility to kind of have 3, 5, 10, 15 work roles if you want. You're pulling the knowledge and skills because that's the end state that you need to get to build your overall position, your JQRs, your training pathways, all of those things to make sure you have that requisite knowledge base.
Thank you very much, Matt. Go ahead.
I'll go to, and I always consider that step 1, right? So know your work role. So James, you want to cover step 2?
So when it comes to step 2, folks, it's not just the work role that you're in. What are the skills that you have? How proficient are you in it? Is where I would keep, is where I am with this. And so the idea is that you've got the basic, intermediate, and advanced, and it's usually tied basically to wherever you're billeted, that sort of thing. So that's why that's there. So those are just examples of, whether it be G8, 538 basic. If you're not sure about that, once again, you need to talk to your supervisor. And there are work role mappings that have been put together on the 8140 website that allows that to happen. What would you add to that, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, if you look here, you'll see there's different colors, right? You'll see the blue, the orange, and there's kind of like I always consider it kind of like a greenish yellow. What that's telling you is those are considered what, Matt, if I'm fair to say, the hot positions.
Yeah, so the ones in orange are when we have our CES positions, Cyber Accepted Service. Anybody that's in line to those programs can receive incentive pay. So extra 10 to 25% on top of it. The ones that are in the, almost puke color green that we have, those are the ones on the watch list. So they've had an identifier where the vacancy rates or things are kind of highlighting to us that they're not enough. So we might need to actually put them on the TLMS. And the top one is the global pay scale. That aligns to NSA's global pay scale of their software developers, their operators, and their EAs to make sure that we have individuals that are in Title 10 and Title 50 doing the same job are getting the same pay.
So if it's fair to say, what's in it for me, there is some incentive. Yeah, there is some incentive pay, right? That is involved in some of these positions, especially the ones that, they need some more folks in.
Yeah, so if you're in an organization in CES, or if you want to get your organization in CES, please contact us. It allows your organizations to start palming for incentive base and giving those people that work in your SOCs and things those types of pays that they can get.
Stop right here. Are there any questions that folks have thus far? You have a question, sir? Go ahead and stand up.
Hi.
Hey.
I know you, and I know you, and you I'm familiar with.
Yep.
Thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you.
I manage probably 30 of these people. How do I get my own training, as I believe it was Dr. Stanger that said, basic, advanced, or intermediate?
Yeah.
I can't find that unless I make it up myself, which is what I've been doing, and I'm living on pins and needles. Do I know this? Do I know that?
You mean you're afraid that you'll say, here's basic, here's advanced, here's intermediate, and if somebody disagrees with you, you can't defend it? Is that what you're worried about?
I have no way
Tony,
to
did you
say
have-
that I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Hey, so James, I think we have the solution in the next slide.
You do indeed. Who knew?
Let's hope.
So-
Boom. Here
Yeah,
we
the
go.
main thing is go check out the DoD Cyber Exchange. You can check out what the options are. And you can go to the Workforce Innovation Directorate, and they have some matrices there. And that allows you to determine the requirements. And that gives you a certain amount of defensibility because it visualizes. You can't have explainability unless you have, well, here's the steps.
So there is various options, right? It could be a mixture, and this comes in a little bit later on in the slides. But for example, you could have some options from CompTIA, you could have some options from SANS, you could have some options from other providers. But the idea is it's all split up on basic, intermediate, or advanced.
That's right.
So Matt, if I can say this one. So for example, you have an employee that's intermediate, but you know that they're going to move on to advanced. You can always go down. You can't go up. Am I correct for saying
Yes.
that?
Yeah, it's the waterfall.
So in other words, if you've now done advanced, you've now hit the requirement for intermediate, and you've now hit the requirement for basic. So what you do find is that some people will, they know that they're going to move on, right? And they feel like they're ready to maybe handle a certification that's in the advanced category. So they'll go ahead and do that so that way they don't have to worry about starting all over again.
And I want to kind of highlight that. So the quals matrix, qualification matrix that it's on the DISA Cyber Exchange, that's intended where we've done a lot of mapping. We've taken the learning objectives, curriculum content in the certification courses and the training courses, and mapped it to the DCWF, the knowledge and skills in the framework. What it's doing is giving you kind of a repository of all the great vendors, all the people that have worked with us that has gone over and above to be able to map to this curriculum. And then also, it's the next phase, the residential. Reach out to them, talk to them. They're going to be able, and they're very familiar with the DCWF, to help you build those training pathways. They know what the DCWF is. They know what the knowledge and skills are, so they're able to kind of help you put together that blueprint.
And I was going to say, so this DoD site is always continuously being updated, and it's always changing because a couple things, if I'm fair to say. We've now covered cybersecurity, but for example, there's some additional categories that are just now starting to be mapped. So like the IT,
Yep.
the cyber enablers. So you're already seeing, so that may be where you're running into some obstacles. So if you see on here on the slide, you'll see IT cyber enablers. If I'm correct, it's still this summer? Okay.
No, so you will see a tasker come out in October for February 2026. That's when IT and cyber enablers are coming up.
Let me take a step back. Define just a little bit for those who may not know what cyber enablers mean.
Back to
Yeah.
Go back. Got it?
Just to make sure everybody's on the same.
So the cyber enablers are all the functional communities that support cyber operations. They're the ones that are internal, your leaders, your acquisitions, your legal, finance, HR. They all are embedded inside of cyber groups, and they have to have a minimum understanding of what cyber does. They want, what are policies, what are strategies, what are, CES, what are the DCWF, just so we have that requirement on there. So when an acquisitions person's talking to an engineer, you understand what a blade is, what a server, basic foundational type stuff. So that's what the cyber enablers are. If you look at this right here, cybersecurity, we started with that.
Let me stop you with cyber neighbors real quick. I've been lucky enough to be on every continent and Antarctica. I haven't been on that one over the last year. Joe Hayden over here, he won't let me go to Antarctica. He says there's nobody there really, except for a bunch of scientists and a few whales. But the reason I bring
Nobody's
this
getting
up,
a security plus.
that's a couple of them have it. A couple of them have it. The reason I bring this up is that every government I've spoken with, the militaries, whether it be Australia, folks in South America, all over Europe. They use the term digital transformation. Enterprises use that term 10 years ago. The reason governments are in there is because of that cyber enablement function. The idea that cyber is just one person or that wizard that walks around and we don't quite know what they do, it doesn't work that way. That everybody needs a level of digital literacy is my point here. And I think that cyber enablement piece is very important. So I just wanted to belabor that. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
And then you were talking about cybersecurity, and then there's cyber effects, which is like offensive, like breaking stuff using cyber.
I was talking about the timeline in that is we did this in a phased approach. Cybersecurity was the first tranche. That's because 8570. We had a lot of information assurance individuals that already had certifications, so it was an easy transition. Next phase is IT and cyber enablers, and also cyber operations, cyber command. And then the next phase after that will be AI, data, software engineering. I will tell you a lot of this capability, people inside of the department are starting to realize it and understand and like the visualization to them. So we are expanding at rapid paces, things like Spectrum, things like acquisitions, things like public affairs. People understand what this is giving you. The work roles give you a level of granularity that normal hiring things don't. So we want to be able to kind of leverage that and be able to reference our PDs and job announcements correctly so we can go after the right talent.
And if it's fair to say, so for example, with the options are always continuously being added. So for example, we have 19 certifications already on the list. Our goal is, knock on wood, I have somebody in the back of the room that's looking at me, hopefully about 30 by the end of this year. So I'm always working and saying, okay, where's the gaps? Where do we need to fill? What are the areas that are out there? Like ICS, critical infrastructure, has been a big one that we've been working on our end.
Yep, OT, we do have a work role represented in there. I will probably be working with ANS later this year to expand that, because I know OT is just not one singular work role.
Yep.
So ICS, SCADA, all of those areas. Mm-hmm. I will advocate, if you have individuals that you work with from your cert providers or training providers that have good training, please have them contact us. We want them in. This is supposed to be as robust as a repository as possible.
Yeah, we have a new cert coming out on OT as well, coming out there, and it's working. I can see it working its way into RA Plus and things like that. It's been interesting to see that.
Did we answer your question pretty well, or did we kind of set you in the right direction? Okay.
You're saying the HR people aren't involved? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are currently working right now, and I will advocate here, when we talk about everyone should be involved. Your J1, your J3, your J5, your J6, whoever is involved in the process, supervisors, hiring managers, need to understand how to create this PD, how to create the JQRs, have this collaboration. We're working with OPM right now to get guidance from a classifying perspective from 2210s, 1550s, 1560s. It's a slow process. In this current environment, it's even slower. So we'll get there eventually, but we're trying to give that area information to you guys to help your hiring managers and classifiers be able to put that into their job announcements.
Did we do good now? Okay.
So the certifiers was one of the things that needed to be brought up more. So thank you for the note. Additional questions, folks? Absent of questions, we'll move on. So what kind of options? There's certification, there's degree programs, and training. Kind of breaks down into those three. As far as skills validation, there are a lot of different choices. You have CompTIA, you have SANS GIAC, et cetera, many of the others that are part of that. From a degree programs perspective, there's academia, the GI Bill, et cetera, all involved. And training does include the many schoolhouses and things like that. Any questions about this particular slide? So it's not just certification that is included. Of course, I have a bias that certification is very nice for portability. In other words, once you leave the military, can you prove through a third party that you really did learn the skill? But anyway, question.
Yes, I'm curious whether there's going to be any centralized look of having like a centralized repository of all training education for the joint force at one level instead of every entity having their own component, like DISA has their own component, Army has their own. Is there any kind of looking at that as a whole so that we're not going to all these different places looking for money to pay for classes?
Yeah, I can answer, reciprocity where we work with services. It's a little bit difficult in that every service wants to do it their own way. We are trying to work with them where we give them that flexibility because it's at the end of the day, it's all about knowledge and skills. So we need to highlight that to our senior leaders to minimize that, cost burden, infrastructure burden, all those types of things. It is not something that's going to happen overnight. It's just one of those things of we don't need numerous courses to get the same export. So it's one of those things that it's allowing us to see the data to tell the storyline correctly to our seniors that we have duplicity across the board.
I'm going to use a fancy phrase, abstraction layer. Anybody ever heard that term before? An abstraction layer is simply this, folks. We've all done a Google search before. We've all used, I suppose, ChatGPT. Imagine all of the complexity that's involved from databases to AI and all that stuff. But we don't see that. We just have a very simple form and we do that. The reason I bring this up, in other words, we have a simple form and then cool things come back as we enter something simple. You know, who is James Stanger? You Google that or whatever, or ChatGPT tells you. That's an abstraction layer, and there's tons of complexity. Now, there's tons of complexity in that question that was just asked. Is there a central resource? There are a certain website that you can go to. All I can say is this, is that the programs that we've mentioned, SANS-GIAC, CompTIA, et cetera, provide a very nice abstraction layer to kind of, where you don't have to worry about that complexity as much because we've done that mapping for you. So I'll say that.
But if the DoD CIO is responsible for training as a whole for the cyber workforce, and all that money would be allocated to one entity, it'd be a cost savings for that one entity.
We would love that.
I would love that.
Yeah, that would be a perfect world. I don't think you're going to hear anybody argue about that over here. It's just...
Could you restate the point just to make sure everybody hears it?
What's that? We would all love that.
No, is there one entity, one place?
One entity that you could...
One funding stream, et cetera. Yes, we would all love that.
And if it helps, I'm going to do a little bit of bragging, Matt. Okay. So they just released their first report, right, that talked about the workforce and cybersecurity. That went to the House Armed Services Committee. So that was the first time that a report has been put together. That is, if I'm correct, public information that anybody can pull up. And so for the first time, you can now see, the public can see of like where the gaps exist, where things are existing, where people are using certification, where they're using training, where they're using other areas. So that report was released, I believe, like a week ago.
Yeah, it was early May.
Yeah. So, I mean, this report is very, very brand new.
It's trying to give back to the thing. To make a point, you need to have data to back it up. This is what is helping us tell the storyline. I always advocate is stakeholder services need to grasp 8140. Use that as your lever to get resources, get training, get people, if you don't have enough to do your mission. This is what helps you tell the storyline to your senior leaders going forward. So,
well, if I'm fair to say, so the House Armed Services Committee, right, has the money, right? We're trying to get more money.
Always.
So that allows you to better accomplish your job. And so these reports are now that step to give that story that allows it to do that. And so hopefully it gives you more resources, better resources. It allows you, what's in it for me. Hopefully it makes your job easier, right? And gives you a better team.
Yeah, I will advocate is that it shows you the level of visibility that this is getting. It's not at these lower level operations. You guys aren't at it alone. All the way up to the senior levels of the Pentagon, all the way up to the House Arms Committee, congressional staffers, very interested in the level of cyber health within the department. So we're always trying to fight and help get more resources and more people.
If I were doing the pitch meeting for 8140, it would be, what if I could dashboard the entire DoD workforce and its particular health, and then you could drill down in to how you could deploy people and move people around and things like that. What if we could do that? And that's what the goal is.
Yep. It's just, I think it's a very complex engine that we're trying to all, you are trying to solve, and we're here to help support.
We're enabling it. Right? We're making it happen. Additional comments, questions anybody have? Shall we go to the next slide, sir?
All right.
So the idea is that the last step from the troops is foundational compliance. So you report to the personnel, the program manager reports up to the people power manager, and then the final step is the DID's office. And so, what about work experience? That's one thing. Maybe I'll throw it over to you, Matt, about how work experience works. DoD, military, civilian only. How do you show the proof and things like that? What additional things do you have to say there, Matt?
Oh, thank you. It's on. We created an SOP. It's on the DISA Cyber Exchange. What it basically does is we understand that a lot of people in these current positions have been working it for 15, 20 years. We don't want to discredit that. So we set up a board similar to military boards where your peers can evaluate your overall experience, your knowledge and skills. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that the person that is capable is in the right job. We don't want to discredit that, so that's where we afforded that ability. But it's current employees. It's not going to be normally out for individuals, new hires, those types of things. Still working through that kind of integral part of how we're going to make it work. But every organization, every command can set up their own board. You'll have your CISO ultimately sign it and send that recommendation up to the CIO for a waiver.
And if I'm correct, you need to have that experience today. So if you would stand there and said, I did that job 5 years ago,
Right.
that won't count. But if you do that job today, and if I'm fair to say, this covers civilians, this also covers military, but it doesn't cover contractors.
Does not.
So, because I know there's a couple contractors here in the room. So, but the work experience with
In all fairness, I haven't implemented contractors quite yet.
So maybe, right?
I'm not saying a word.
Does that kind of make sense?
Right, good. All right. And moving on, that's the last step. And we've got Brian. I think the next step is the leaders.
So I was going to say on here with certification, one of the things that's always great about it, and it's true of CompTIA and SANS and anybody else, like for example, CISSP through ISC2, is it does allow you to, once you get into the residential, where you have to meet CPEs. If you have your certification's current, you do not have to meet additional CPEs. In other words, the CPEs you're getting through the certification now meets those requirements. You look a little bit, is that a good, so you tilt the head a little bit, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Nope.
Kind of what I was alluding to about the idea of the abstraction layer. Once you take care of that cert, it simplifies things for you. So the idea of the DoD Cyber Exchange, for example, when it comes to, we have Security Plus, CompTIA, of course, for that. There's the 20 different job roles that, for example, Security Plus maps to. So, and the nice thing about that, once again, is that if you've got one job role, you want to add another one, it allows you to upskill yourself and move along, which wasn't as available really under the 8570 program. Do you have a hand in there?
Just go back one slide.
Go back one slide, go up.
Am I at the right spot?
One more.
One more?
So,
Go ahead and go to the microphone so I can hear you. Sorry, man.
I guess one of my curiosities is CompTIA, Security Plus, it's all good, but that doesn't necessarily give the technician the skills they need to look at a log file and say there's an adversary in the wire. Are we looking at certifications as a whole, saying what does my technician require to tell if somebody's in the fence?
It does in the sense that usually if you're going to pass Security Plus, you're going to have taken the equivalent of, say, A Plus or Network Plus or something, which does teach you about the log files and things like that.
Yeah, but it's not that detailed.
So,
yeah, it is.
It gets into various levels. The whole purpose of the certifications, going through it from the foundational perspective, is that the individual that has those is going to be more successful in the job once they come into the operational center. Every one of them, what you're talking about is in the weeds, details, platforms,
Something
tools.
more on the technical level.
Right. It gets
what am I
into the
looking at?
organizational specific, and that's where the organization develops those residential qualifications.
Right,
they
right.
can work with cert providers to create that.
Right.
You can also create in-house stuff, military training. Right. At the end of the day, you're trying to get to those knowledge, skills, and abilities again. where you create numerous work roles together.
Right.
But the first part is to get the aptitude. Are the people capable of doing the job? That's where you get the certifications, and then you work on the follow-on.
Another cert or training program, whether it be for from SANS GIAC or CompTIA, we have the CYSA Plus, which is definitely about log file analysis and things like that. If we're going to do that soon, that's another one. But SANS GIAC certainly has the equivalent of that. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, here's some examples of the GIAC certification. So anything that begins with a G is typically us. So you'll see our GIAC Cyber Threat Intelligence, GCTI. You also see, looking over here, our Security Architect. So if you see on here, you'll see it has less roles than a Security Plus. But now we're going a little bit more detailed. We're going a little bit more specific. And so our certifications also have lab-based testing. So the idea is that if you're a brain surgeon, you eventually have to go in the brain and figure out what to do. So we actually have built where we even have, it's using a VMware box, where you're now going in there where it's recreating the tools that you would have. And so as interesting as it sounds, there's multiple scenarios to get to the right answer, right?
Right. I think mandating the SANS stuff would be key, because the GIAC, me personally, I think the GIAC security training blows CompTIA ISC squared out of the water, and how deep and detailed they go in on the technician side of the house. But
I would say it depends on the course.
It's not as cost effective as the CompTIA stuff, right?
Yeah.
CompTIA is a lot cheaper in comparison, and DISA as a whole is not offering any of the SANS training as of now. Maybe in the future.
Okay.
But I know they're not right now because of the cost.
I mean, I guess I always look at it, you got an orange, you got an apple. Some people need oranges, some people need apples. They all kind of have their own little different purpose. And so I always kind of look at us in the ecosystem as we're all accomplishing different things. Our certifications have always been a little bit more of the technical, in the weeds type of certifications that are out there. But they all have their place, right? I mean, I tell James every day, 90% of folks that have GX certifications have a Security Plus.
Yeah,
Very, very common.
One of the things that we did with CYSA Plus that's really fun is with our hands-on labs, we get people where we get people spin up the virtual labs and things like that. And one of the things that we did recently was a really fun lab talking about somebody has penetrated your Active Directory in the cloud. What are some of the indicators of compromise that you look for specifically? That's found in our CYSA cert, for example. So it's all about the hands-on and practical. And that's one reason why we pioneered the use of hands-on exams. Okay, questions coming up. Okay, there you go.
So the question was, you stated something regarding the certification and the CPD. True or no? Continuous professional development.
So if you, for example, you have to do 20 CPEs per year.
Correct statement.
If you have a certification, that could be a CompTIA certification, that could be ours, that could be a CISSP, any that are listed there. If you have that certification, it meets the requirement, you do not have to do the 20 CPEs. You just have to keep your certification current. So that's probably the big, because with the certifications, as you can imagine, there is CPE requirements now built into them. So the idea is that they're asking that, hey, because you're doing CPEs already, and so Matt, let me know, he can smack me if I say the wrong thing.
He's speaking for GIAC.
And that's what I'm trying to accomplish. Is
We still have
what's
not.
your position?
Yeah, we're going to mirror a lot what the cert providers have done, because they've done a really good job of CEUs, CPUs, classifying what that is. We haven't come out necessarily with an SOP of what classifies that. So we will. It's on the 2025 docket to come out with it, so you guys can start working towards being able to have those types of continuous professional development.
It was interesting to watch CompTIA. Well, I wasn't a member of CompTIA at the time to put together that CPE program. In fact, a couple of people over there are the ones that held that together.
James, if I'm fair to say, for all of us, the CPE program was developed because of 8570.
Because of 8570.
Yeah, I will confess, GIAC did not have a CPE program before 8570. It actually forced us all to do it.
Yeah.
And I believe that was true of you, too.
Oh, yeah.
So that was created because of the military.
And I do want to point out and we went extreme, we lessened the amount, it's 20 hours per year. Use that as a resource for you guys to advocate for your people to constantly get training. Every time we go to the operation centers, we always hear, well, they won't let me go. Well, this is a mandate by the department. You will get 20 hours a year. So use that to your benefit to be able to kind of get that training dollars and resources.
And over here, and I think, James, yours the same way, so please let me know. Sure. We do have free opportunities for people to get CPEs.
Oh, yeah?
For example, we host a series of summits. Like we have a Hack Fest that we do every year. We have one coming up next week on emerging technologies. Like we just did an AI summit. Those are actually free virtually. If you attend some of our webinars, that actually gets you CPEs or CEUs. Either do you like tomato or you like tomato?
Yeah, I do dozens of webinars. All of them are free and CE. In fact, tomorrow we're doing one here upstairs that's available. People can attend it virtually or in person. For that, you get 2 hours of them.
Is there still seats available?
Yeah.
Yeah. So sign on up.
Yeah, that's tomorrow at 1:30. You can, again, either virtually or in person. So we do those things all the time. All of the organizations do that. You can check that out. So those are free ways to do it. The problem being, for a lot of people, oh, sorry, man. Problem being, for some,
I didn't ask.
Okay. So I'll blame you anyway. The problem being, for some people, that's kind of cumbersome. So there are fee-based ways that you could do it that could be easier for some people. So we make it possible for people to do it either way.
And if you actually
I'll do that.
take another SANS course, that actually can apply over to now giving you CEUs. So the idea is that you're always keeping current by maybe taking a certification that's actually in line with what your current certification is. So that's something else that we're looking, like, for example, we now have people, like we have somebody from Walt Disney Imagineering with over 30 of GIAC certifications. As you can imagine, it gets very, very complicated to take CEUs for 30 certifications. So we're now counting for multiple.
All doing that kind of making it easy to again, one takes care of many.
We never thought in our wildest dreams we'd have thousands of people with 10 plus GIAC certifications. So now we found ourselves in an area that we never found ourselves in. How do we manage that?
Yeah, that's why we created our pathways, for example, at CompTIA, to recognize that, to make the CPE much better.
And actually, you get extra credit if you, for example, if you take one of CompTIA's certifications, that actually counts at a much higher level than it would be if you just took some random course.
So again, we just try to make it as easy as possible for people to get upskilled. Because Brian and you and I were talking about this over lunch. More and more organizations, whether it be government, whether it be enterprise, you could drop an enterprise person in here in the place of Matt. They're realizing that they need to really upskill their existing people as much or even more than bringing new people in. But question, finally.
Sorry, question. Yeah, Josh Martin, first, thank you all for helping demystify some of this. I mean, you guys know it. We don't know it as well as you, so I appreciate it. Question, there is a growing trend and push in the government to do fixed price performance-based contracts. How does 8140 fit into that world where the government is going to ask somebody to do something at a fixed price and get something done without saying, and you must do it with these exact type people?
Just so I want to make sure that I ask is, are you talking, so currently right now what we're going to end up doing is we'll update the DFARS. Individuals, like right now, you have requirements of 8570 already baked into contracts. We're going to have language that says similar things for 8140. My ideal thing is I'm going to work with GSA to update LCATs to make sure that those individuals in cybersecurity or cyber professionals have levels 1, 2, and 3 that can meet to certain, hourly wages and things to meet that. At the end of the day, it's kind of one of those, we put out a PWS, contracting fills that PWS with the type of people that we need to be able to do the job. So
My question is, like, let's say DISA came to me and said, I want you to make circuit provisioning go faster. It is a performance-based contract. It's not a staffing contract. you're going to make you go 10% faster, and I'll give you X dollars. Would 8140 be applicable to that kind of contract, or will I be able to bring whatever resources I need to bear to make that go?
So anyone that will actually touch an infrastructure network will have to be in compliance with it.
So if you're going to get hands-on,
And internal of the DoD type operations
Okay, that
infrastructures.
makes sense.
Yeah.
All right,
Anybody
thanks,
that's
Matt.
bringing an external that doesn't necessarily have to go through, you do an ATO to put a platform on top, most likely will not be part of
Okay.
that contract.
Okay, that helps. Thanks.
Yeah.
And somebody here reminded me, because actually I didn't even know this, we do a lunch and learn for free for Netcom monthly. So that was something even I didn't know. James, did you want to cover why certification matters, or do you want me to cover it?
Oh, the idea of certification matters, folks, is, once again, I already mentioned it earlier, but the idea of portable skills validation. It's the idea, I just remember a person I knew who worked on radar systems and in the military and had a heck of a time getting a job in the private sector because, frankly, they just didn't, for whatever reason, believe that his years of radar upskilling ability, and he always referred to it as, he said, I was applying for a job that was like, your first erector set little radar, and he couldn't convince the people that were hiring that he had enough skills in working on systems that were far more complex because he couldn't port believably, credibly, that skill over. And that's the one thing that I think is really exciting about the dashboarding of the workforce, et cetera, is that the portability that you can validate it because it's validated by third parties. That's where certification's in it for me. It was a big deal for me because I had a lot of skills when I was first getting into tech. In 1992, think about this, I was working on the internet, on databases, digitizing texts, using a metadata language. That was in 1992. Now, who could prove that I had that skill? Most people didn't even know what that stuff was. So there's just a couple of examples as to why I think it's a really important, why certification matters. It's also a very good indicator of future success. It can be. And finally, I think it's also something that it not only validates learning, but it's something that is fair. It's legally defensible, and more importantly, I think it democratizes education in that the skills are out there, the objectives are there, everybody sees it, you can see it's out there, and it's something that makes it possible for you to keep things on an even keel. Brian, what would you add to that?
So one thing that's always interesting about certification is everybody thinks you just develop questions and poof, it's done and you release it. That's actually surprisingly only about 10% of the work. So both organizations, we spend a lot of time making sure that those questions are now people are answering those questions equally. So for example, we had a series of questions. Those people were answering the same percentage across the board, even different demographics. We sent those questions to the Middle East. They dropped all the way down to 10%. Sadly, we have to throw those questions out. We have to rebuild them. So anytime you take a certification, there's actually questions on there that we're testing out in the marketplace that are actually, hopefully this doesn't make anybody mad, but you're not getting credit for it because we're testing in the marketplace to make sure that those questions, and those could be whether it's ABCD, those could be lab-based, they could be scenario-based questions, but we're literally looking at that with the idea. So these are best practices long before cybersecurity existed. These are considered best practices of any certification. So that could have been going all the way back to doctors, lawyers, when they were developing the SATs, the ACTs. Those are where a lot of the time is spent on certification, is literally testing questions out to, as James noted, to make it legally defensible. And so the idea is that it's no different than when a doctor gets a, license, no different than a lawyer, an accountant. The CPA is an example in another industry. That's another certification. It's almost kind of like you get a driver's license, right? So sometimes people always go, I got a certification, and Joe over here, and he wasn't my top person in my organization, but he's got your certification. Certifications are what I would call a skill standard. So it literally makes sure, it's kind of like a doctor. Doesn't mean you're the best doctor in the world, Doesn't mean you're the worst doctor in the world. But do you want to go to a doctor that doesn't have a license? Right? It means it has a skill standard. So sometimes I think certification gets a little bit lost in that, if that's fair to say.
I think it's also something that is efficient. It really does help save time. And people use the terms these days, fancy words like explainability and transparency. But you can't have explainability unless you have transparent. Here are the learning, here are the objectives. And if you take a look at the objectives that are put forth, whether it be in a cyber range or a certification or whatever, where did those certifications come from? Because they just didn't come from Matt or just from a couple of people at SansGIAC or a couple of people at ISC2 or whatever. You're looking at questions and objectives that are vetted by literally thousands, each of them, by thousands of working IT pros. And I think that's a really big deal, the maturity of knowledge you get there. I always like to call the objectives that are in any cert the scalable mentor. I wish I had those objectives back when I was first learning, IT.
Those certifications are developed by a large pool of people that are all working together, and they're testing those questions. It's interesting. So we just did a workforce report. And so one of the questions on there is, does skills validation matter to you? This was an international report, so I have to throw that out there. This went way beyond DoD. This was a lot of corporate. But does certification matter to you for winning business? So that could be a government contractor, for audits, even cyber insurance. I will confess, being in the certification, I expected it maybe to be 30, 35, maybe 20. It actually came in at 65%. We expect that number only to get, and that was not GIAC, that was all certification.
Across the board.
Yeah, that was across the board of skills validation, and does it matter? So it is something that's portable, that goes into you as you move your career on.
It's interesting you bring that up about. I was just looking at our 2025 workforce report. It was a similar thing having to do with what's driving the reason why anybody likes certs or whatever. And it was interesting that compliance was certainly a major one of them. And of course, we're talking as part of your program, compliance is certainly that. Now, we are just a few minutes shy of you all getting your CPE credit.
Well, we're going to get you 2 CPs, right?
We're getting you 2 CPs, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, going.
That's right.
One thing I did want to note also was, and so this is actually commending Matt and some of the work. So one of the questions we asked is, are directives or mandates, things along those lines, influencing your hiring? I'll admit 1 year out, because that also could be stuff like out of the EU, that's the NIS2, and that's a whole nother conversation, or the CMMC, which I know affects this world quite a bit. I expected that number to be 10, 20%. It actually ended up being over 40%, which is interesting knowing that that's only in the uphill, right? Like all this stuff is still very, very brand new. In Europe, it was actually 50%. And I think that's just because Europe loves its regulations, right?
They do indeed. But see, we're getting, like you said, we're getting a lot more regulations, whether it be the New York cyber regulation, the California CCP.
Well, and if I'm fair to say, this industry is still a very, very young industry, right? And so when people sometimes say, what's the future of our industry? I say, just look at every other industry and see how those industries... think of the doctoral industry, the accounting industry. They have, about 100 years ahead of us as far as getting it right?
See, period-based, book-based accounting was, 17th, 18th century. So, yeah.
So even more
right.
than 100 years, right?
Uh-huh.
So
well over.
Even aviation, for example, about 100 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So, I always say there's no secret.
And it's interesting, I talked to I go to an organization where there seems to be, every time you could swing a dead cat and hit about 15 different medical doctors for whatever reason. Tons of them around. And I asked them, how do you get your CPEs? And I said, well, they go to Hawaii and get their fancy
I see them all the time.
And things like that. But it was interesting. I said, what are those? You take exams, don't you? She said, yeah, we take exams every year. I said, do you have to go in and work on a physical body and get examined that way? And they're like, no, not at all. I said, well, what do you do? And the guy he literally goes, you ever heard of, Pearson VUE? And I'm like, yeah, I've heard of Pearson VUE. They go in and take exams every year. And I said, are those, simulations of surgeries and things like that? And he says, no, they're just A, B, C, and D questions. So it's interesting to me that there are valid ways, hands-on, which we do, Brian and I have been talking about it, but also the linear ABCDs. All of them have their value.
We hit 5 o'clock exactly. Can we go on for a couple more minutes?
Yeah. Well, I do want to, Matt, we've kept you quiet for the last 15 minutes here.
No, I was enjoying this sort of.
So what final thoughts, if any, that you have concerning 8140, whether it be, say, the future of 8140, some of the things that you're looking to do, et cetera? Just any final thoughts?
I always advocate, Brian kind of brought it up a little bit. We're in the beginning stages. It's the infancy stage of 8140. People are, all worried about this. It's a whole process to kind of maneuver and change this ecosystem of cyber. What we're doing is kind of doing some pathfinding of trying to qualify our workforce. So bear with us. We will get you the tools and resources to be successful. We are constantly expanding the DCWF to other areas. So we're also doing that. We're bringing fellow individuals that you work with on a day-to-day basis into this forum. So I will always say, be calm. We're going to get there. Also, advocate for yourself. Understand if you don't know what 8140 is, it's not going away. Go learn, go read, and use it as a tool for yourself. It's a readiness tool. Everyone does it. We already know how to do it. Please, is it perfect? No. If you have ideas, if you want to be part of the forums, come reach out to us. We'll get you in part of these wonderful distros that you'll get 100 emails from me a day. So please take hold of this, take it your own, and then kind of advocate for yourself.
Any additional questions, comments, et cetera?
Hey, James, I turned to this slide just because I thought this was an important one. So, what's in it for me, right? So what is DoD doing? I thought this was always a good one, and I know that we've kind of said that. Personnel, helping with that, helping with training, skilling up, pay, benefits, right? What's in it for me? And then building the next generation of the workforce. And so, Matt, I know I used this example last week. I was at the gym, and somebody learned that I worked for SANS, and they said, and I had a whole bunch of folks come up to me and they go, I've been trying so hard to get into cyber and I'm struggling. And one guy turned to me and he goes, I did the smartest thing ever. He said, I went through school. He said, I got a great degree. I learned a lot. But instead of going and getting my first job, I joined the military. And he said that made his career so much more successful, so much more quickly by doing that. And so that's something that I think we always advocate is, DoD has always, if I'm fair to say, been an incubator for a lot of industries. I look at aviation, I look at medical, and so, for guilty purposes, I love to see it happen here in cybersecurity, but it is a great place for people to start their careers. And I think that's something in our roles we need to really kind of advocate for. And people, what's happening is people are coming out and, hey, cybersecurity's hot. I got my degree and I thought I was going to get 6 figures overnight and I was going to have 20 job offers and I'm not getting that. The guy that went in the military says, well, I did after I got out.
So come work for the department.
Huh?
So come work for the department.
Yeah, come work for the department. I put a ball. My goal was to have an eagle come in right behind us. But
I know.
We had some budget cutbacks.
Something with a flyover or something. Yeah.
So thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. If you have no other questions before, we'll call an end to this particular session. If you have questions of myself, Brian, or Matt, come on up. Thank you again for your time, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Got a selfie here?